Fractional reserve banking is a fundamental part of all modern economies. First introduced in Europe in the 16th century, bankers ever since have made sure to lend out most, but not all, of the deposits held by their institutions. Originally, the reason for holding a fraction in reserve was to protect the bank in case many or most of its depositors needed cash at the same time. Today, there are reserve requirements imposed on American banks by the Federal Reserve System in its ongoing effort to manage the nation's money supply. We're going to begin by asking this question about where money comes from. So, where does money come from? When asked where money comes from, students will come up with some interesting answers. It grows on trees. It comes from mom and dad. The government prints it. In this activity, students play the role of bankers and borrowers and discover the way in which banks create money. To prepare for this activity, determine how many banks you'll need by dividing the number of students in your class by 6. So a class of about 24 would have 4 banks. Prepare the appropriate number of banker packets, and the remaining students get one of 3 borrower roll cards. All students get the instructions, the money supply handout, and the debriefing questions. You will also want some reward for students that meet their goal. In this activity, you're going to play the role of bankers and borrowers. So let's identify who the bankers and borrowers are right now and pass out these roll cards. So I'm going to have our bankers kind of spread in different sections of the room. So I'm going to ask you to be a banker, okay? Brian, I'm going to have you be a banker. So if you guys need help, I will be your assistants. Lena, I'm going to have you be a banker. And then let's come back here to the back. And Gabriella, will you be a banker? The rest of you are going to be borrowers. And so what I'm going to hand out right now is a role descriptions card that has bankers on one side, borrowers on the other. So read the part that is for you. Okay, all borrowers got one of 3 roles passed out. You're playing the role of one of 3 borrowers. And so whether you are Donald Dysfunction, Polly Perfect, or Pamela Plastic, start channeling that role right now. You're going to read your role, and at the top it's going to tell you your risk level, and then it will also tell you how much money you're trying to borrow and for what. Your goal, borrowers, is to borrow enough money throughout the game to try to meet your goal. Give students time to read the instructions and their roles. Answer any questions, making sure students understand their goals, that they can only get 1 loan per round, and they can take multiple rounds to borrow enough money to meet their goal. Once they meet their goal, they can collect a reward. The goal of the bankers is to lend 80% of the deposits in each round. Okay, bankers, let's look at you for a minute. You have a bank balance sheet that looks similar to this. Now, at the top, you'll notice that you get points for making loans to low-risk borrowers, medium-risk borrowers, and high-risk borrowers. And all of those points are points. And the more points you have at the end of the game, the more candy that you can purchase with that. So in the beginning, banks, you have $10,000 in deposit. You can't lend all of that money out. What do we learn about banks? And they have a reserve requirement. And so your reserve requirement is 20%, which means you can actually lend out 80% of that money, and you have to keep the other 20% on hand. So right here, they're going to keep track of their borrower's name, use their actual name that they have on their name tag, and ask them their risk level, keep a record of how much you lent to them, and then make a note of the points that you earned for that loan. At the end of the round, we'll add all that up. You lend as much as you can, up to that $8,000. In between rounds, the depositors will come back and they will deposit money into your bank, and you can keep a record of that here, and then I'll tell you where to go as we go into round 2. Begin round 1. Okay. Brian, the market's not open yet. You guys are ready. Go. Market's open. Try to get a loan.
Okay. 3,000? Is that what you guys want?
Is it okay if we did deposit?
Where'd you already deposit it? Oh, just hold on to it. Okay. It's okay if you already did.
You think they could take 3,500?
I guess.
All right.
That's all you're going to get. I just want to go shopping.
After about 3 minutes, call time and have students return to their seats.
Okay, round 1 is over. Everybody have a seat?
Instruct students that got loans to deposit those in any bank on their way to their seats. Point out that going into round 1, there was $10,000 in each bank, for a total of $40,000 in our game. Draw that on the board and have them do the same on their handout. Then ask bankers how much they collected in new deposits. Add that to the initial money and draw the new total on the graph.
Going into round one, every bank had $10,000, and there's 4 banks in the room. So how much money was in this little mini economy we have here? $40,000. So here's round, I'm going to make a little bar graph for round one. This is our money over here. And we at 40,000, this was round one. This is how much money. And now, banks, how much money do you have to lend right now, going into the next round?
8,000.
8,000 plus. You have another 8,000 to lend? 6,000, so that's 60, that's 22. 8. Plus 8, that's $30,000 more the banks have to lend out. Now, is that $40,000 still there? It's still on their books? So now, what's the total amount of money? 70,000 going into round two. So that would be right here. Okay?
Make sure they understand that the original money still exists. It's just not sitting in the bank. Rather, it's being lent out and is being used for things like home remodeling or college tuition. Verify that the bankers know that they can now lend out only 80% of the new deposits they took in, keeping 20% on reserve.
Okay? So you know where banks have money, and if you haven't met your goal, go out and try to get some more money to work towards your goal.
All I need to borrow is $1,000. Tell me about you, Sabina.
I suck.
We got 10
My credit's
seconds
horrible,
left in this round.
but I need money to go to college.
I am high risk, but it's only $1,000.
Continue rounds 2 and 3 in the same way, rewarding students as they meet their goals. As the game progresses and the money supply increases, it will become easier for students with higher risk to obtain loans.
How much did you need?
15.
Great, we can do that.
All right, perfect.
Did you meet your
As
goal?
the students meet their goals, reward them.
104 here. Okay. What's happening? Where is this money coming from? Where is all of this extra money? At work where? In the community. Doing what kind of things? Remodeling houses, buying cars, buying homes, paying for college tuition.
Whether imposed by prudence or a banking regulation system, fractional reserve banking, the process of taking in deposits, holding a fraction in reserve, and lending out the rest, actually enables banks to create money.